fight over these things. And this is a chance to put Jesus on the spot. Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment." By the way, we're going to go a little step further. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Now, when we think of the Old Testament law, or the books of laws out of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, we do realize Genesis doesn't have laws. It's history. Half of Exodus has laws. All of Leviticus is legal. A large portion of Numbers is narrative, and Deuteronomy is all legal, okay? How many laws are there? If you were to ask an Orthodox Jew, they have separated them enough until they get to 613. That's a lot, right? Then why do we always say the 10 Commandments? Because all the other commandments stand on those 10, right? When it comes to differentiating yourself because of God, have only one God. And what we do will show that we belong to that one God. When it talks about things like idol worship and stuff, you shall have no other gods before me. When it talks about murder, or what about accidental death, what about if someone kills for this reason, you shall not murder. All these things all connect. Well, even the 10 Commandments can collapse down to two things: love God and love man. The first four are all about God. Fixate on God. The other 6 are dealing with man. Love God, love man. Jesus isn't making this out of thin air. It's in the Torah. So we're going back to the Old Testament. Now, the first part that Jesus brings up is actually from Deuteronomy chapter 6. I think it's chapter 6. I want to read it for you for just a second. This is the theme verse, if you will, of Israel. Chapter 6, verses 4 and 5. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. Does that sound familiar? It's exactly what Jesus said. The second part that Jesus said actually also comes from that portion. It comes from, let me read right here in my notes, Leviticus 19:18. Saw a movie not long ago and I thought it was great. Someone was trying to learn more about the Bible and he said, Leviticus, what is that? It's very funny to me. It says, you shall not take vengeance nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. They were supposed to show love to one another as Israelites. Now, ultimately, they were supposed to be a light to the surrounding nations. Well, this is the basis of love. Love God, love others. God loved us. Now, we can go to greater extents on how much does God love us beyond our capacity to fully understand. He gave his only son for liars, cheaters, murderers, adulterers, people that were evil abusers. He gave his son for everybody. And sometimes we may say, well, I'm not as bad as them, but we're still wrong. But God gave his son for everyone. It's just that not everyone's going to accept that, right? I know people never like this, but I'm honest. Did God give Jesus for Adolf Hitler? Yes. Adolf Hitler refused Jesus. God gave Jesus also for Saul of Tarsus, who ultimately accepted Jesus. It's not that one person's better than the other. It's the decisions people make. God's love is seen in that he gave his only son. Now, another scripture I want us to go to right here. We're not going to all of them because I know there's so many of them. And that's good. That tells us we're grounded in the faith when we have this many scripture on it. And that's going to be John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35. John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35. My apology. I'm normally not told I'm not loud enough, but I'm not loud enough. Okay, I'm sorry, brother. I'm just joking. For the sake of this, these are the two verses that are specific. We're going to go from verse 31 to 35 That way we can get a little bit of context. Jesus, this is after the introduction of the Lord's Supper, the night that he'll be betrayed. Judas has already left, okay? And Jesus is teaching them. He's telling them things, and they're not fully understanding it. So he comes to this. So when he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and glorify him immediately. Little children, I shall be with you a little while longer. You will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, where I was going, you cannot come. So now I say to you, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." So how will people distinguish true followers of Jesus versus people who just say they're followers of Jesus? Well, naturally, there's a lot of things we can talk about. We can talk about the teaching. But if there's no love, then their teaching has not taken hold, is it? Love is the clear demonstrator. Now, in 1 John, we got several verses of 1 John. We're not going to all of them. But I want to tell you this. In one part in 1 John, John says, this is a new commandment. He's mimicking what Jesus said. And then he says, but it's not really new, it's old. It comes from the Old Testament. But it's demonstrated in the perfect way in Jesus. Remember, Jesus demonstrated his love. Now, there's a Greek word here that I want y'all to know about. It is called, no, that's Hebrew. It's called agape. Agape. In fact, every now and then you'll hear someone say, "Do you have agape love?" And I don't know why, but when you put it in English, it looks like a grape. It's missing an R, but it looks like a grape. Agape love. Agape, there's actually several words in Greek for love. It turns out there's at least 5, but for the longest time we knew of 3. Other of the words are a little wishy-washy as far as they mean this or that, but there were 3 main words, and that would be phileo, eros, and agape. Phileo refers to brotherly love, consideratory love, love to one another, kindness, that kind of thing. Eros is sexual kind of love, the love between a husband and a wife. Agape, by the time of the first century, kind of lost any meaning, and it was kind of used for whatever. Jesus takes it and reinvigorates it with life. He uses it with the idea of love that is based on the desire for another person, not sexually, but the best for them despite relationship. So in other words, not because you're a family member, not because you're a spouse, but because I care about you. But it's a kind of care that goes beyond. Well, how do we know that? We know that from Jesus. We know that strictly from Jesus. He loves us, and we reciprocate that love towards him, but also we reflect it towards others. And I'm going to be honest, it's hard to love some people that don't like you. The clear demonstration of love for us isn't just that we love everybody, but it's clearly seen between us and between each and every one of us. Not only do I love you, you love me. Not only do you love me, you love that we love everybody within our group. It's not just a love that's demonstrated, no one else reflects it. It's reflected in here. And that sets us apart. In fact, John says in 1 John, if there is no love in you, then you are not God's, or you don't belong to God. That's the clear demonstration that something's changed in your heart. People are very selfish people, aren't we? Let's be realistic. We are self-centered. But when we become children of God, it doesn't mean we magically stop being self-centered, but we're in a process, a change within us. We're automatically, when we put faith in Jesus, his children. But we're also having a spiritual change that slowly reflects in our lives. And sometimes it can make massive jumps. But we go from it's all about me to it's about him. And not only is it about him, but it's about them. Even though I never necessarily liked so-and-so because they were in a different class. They were in a different neighborhood. I don't care. I thank the world for them now. Because I'm not looking at where they're from, what they can do. I'm looking at who they are in Jesus Christ. That's what's a motivating difference amongst us versus others. That's how we're supposed to show ourselves as different than all the other religions. Sure, there's absolutely amazing differences. We give an answer for why there's evil and what the solution is. We actually acknowledge what's happened in the past. We tie ourselves to historical events. Other religions, and I'm not picking, I'm just being honest, they have religious writings that never actually identify a specific thing in history. It's just what you might call talking head theology. You look in the Bible, it names places, it names people, it names times, it names actual edicts, it names all these things, and we can look it up. That makes it actually just different. You don't have other religious writings that way. It makes it entirely different. So love is the key. What happens when we dislike someone? They've done something wrong in church. It doesn't change the fact that we love them. Sometimes there can be actual things that happen that hurt fellowship. There should still be care and love. If that person needed help, I'd still help them. That kind of a thing. I'd still pray for them. There's no hatred. There's love. There's just disappointment that there's an actual barrier there now. Can saved people hurt their fellowship in church? Absolutely. We see that in the past. And I'm sorry to say it'll happen in the future. But the point of our first doctrinal statement is to set a tone. Of all the doctrines, all the specific tenets of belief that's going to come after it, the first thing we identify is we should not forget that we are known for real, honest love. When people can look at us and say, they get along. They're not fighting and backstabbing each other for power in their church. Well, none of us have power. Only Jesus has authority. But even beyond all that, we love one another. When they look at us and they see that there's some differences on opinions on things in the Bible. I'm sure all of us in here has a difference of opinion on one thing or another. That's okay. As long as it's not doctrine, agree to disagree. I talked to a guy in prison. Love leading with that. And he was not a prisoner. He was a volunteer too. And they call him Eschatological Ted. All he wanted to talk about was end-time events. That's it. I didn't know this guy, and it was around Christmas. I came to help out with the Christmas things, and my students thought, let's play a trick on Brother Medlock. Oh, all I got to say is, I did not take it as easy as I had been on homework after that. It wasn't punishment. It was like, well, if they are so good at this, then I want to see how good they, no. But they said, we want to let you meet Ted. They knew that Ted always pushes end-time events, everything, end-time events. 2.5 hours later, when Ted finally realized that I am not going to just bend to what you want, Ted left me alone. Now, every time we saw each other, and we rarely see each other, I say hi, and he smiles and I smile, but he doesn't believe the Temple Mount is the Temple Mount. His whole reason, though, is if that's not the Temple Mount, if it's a little bit further south, they could build a temple now, and Jesus can come back faster. You can't make God do things. You can't speed it up. It doesn't work that way. I've been there. That's the Temple Mount. It really is. Do I still love him? Yes. I still smile. I still hug him the few times we see him. I just pray to God he doesn't bring something up because I'm afraid of what's going to happen. There can be disagreements. That's not life-shattering. But is it a little odd around him? Yeah, and that's okay. What are aspects of love that are different for us versus our society? What do we think society means when they say love? Nathan? Yeah. Romantic love. Here's one of the problems with English. We throw everything into one word. It's not bad having separate words, is it? So we throw everything into one word. What's another aspect of love that our society says that's different than what we're talking about with this kind of love? Adelie. How do you make such good grades in school? You pay attention. Wow, that's humorous. What is an area of our society where they use the word love that's very odd compared to the way we use the word love? I wouldn't say necessarily. I don't think it's necessarily always strong friendship there, is it? The one thing I would say, though, is they'll say things like love as in, if you love me, you will accept me. Or if you love me, you will agree with me. No. I love you, but if you still want to put your finger in that fire or that electrical socket, it ain't going to change. It's going to shock you. Okay? But that's a problem. Today, love is a way of saying, you should agree with me. And normally those people say, you should love me, are normally yelling at you. That ought to be an interesting aspect. I'm not feeling the love, bro. Not at all. Our society says one thing, but Jesus says another. Let me give you an example. 1 Corinthians chapter, I believe it's 5. We have an instance where something's going on in the church of Corinth. It's a very sad instance. A man is having relations with his stepmother. This violates the Bible. It violates nature. This is wrong. And Paul says you need to go to him and talk to him, and if he will not listen, put him out of the church. And the hope is that he will see the error of his ways and come back. This isn't to be done to be mean. It's done out of love, protective love for the church that's there, but also love in that we're trying to get his attention. This is wrong. We cannot stand for truth and then let that happen. Does that make sense? Our society says, if you love someone, you'll just agree with them. That molehill will turn into an avalanche on a large mountain very quickly. I promise. It goes crazy when you do that. When they started saying things like you can't define love, and they were talking from a sexual standpoint. Well, actually everybody's defining love in that instance, aren't they? The very statement doesn't make sense. You can't define love. Well, you are. You're defining love. If people can't define love and yet you are for your point, then that very statement is illogical. Yes, we can define love. It's just whose definition are you going with? Now, I'll admit, I'm going with the biblical definition. But at first it was you can't define love. Why can't two people of the same sex get together? Next thing is, how can you define love? Why can't 5 people be one marriage? And that, I've actually read an article where someone said that. And about a couple months ago, I said this in Sunday school. How can you define love? There's a Mexican mayor that married his iguana. I don't think we're all using the same word correctly here. That being said, the point is, everyone has their definition for love. Yes, you can define love, but what definition are you going with? It's not saying you're a liar, you're dumb. People go crazy. We should not do that. What definition do we go with? Biblical definition. True biblical love cares about other people. Even when we disagree, even when they've done wrong, we still care. But it doesn't stop the fact that we stand for truth. That truth doesn't mean that we force it down their throats. We stand for truth. We still care about them. What if there is, let me say this, I don't agree with Islam for a lot of reasons. But if a Muslim needed help, biblically I'm supposed to help. That's love. Okay? Love doesn't mean agree. It means love. Now, in a church, we can have disagreements over things that don't matter as much, and we can still love. It's the tit-for-tat hatred in our society that we are not supposed to reciprocate. All right? I have a view on when the rapture is going to be. At seminary, I got several colleagues that don't agree with that. We still love each other. That's okay. We can agree to disagree on things that aren't as important because we understand whenever it is, we're all going. And we're actually probably not going to be gloating on the way up. We're actually just going to be smiling. Jesus is here. Amen. So this is how we're going to be known. Now, love don't mean it's easy. Same reason my kids, I think one of my kids at one point said, Daddy, don't you love me, after they gotten a whooping. Now, the honest truth is, the fact I gave them a whooping is actually an act of love because I was correcting bad behavior. If I didn't love them, I'd let them keep going, which ultimately would only destroy their life. They don't see it that way. And then the response is, I do love you. You just don't understand why or how right now. Well, that's the same way with God's love, isn't it? There is punishment. There is acknowledgement. And some of that punishment isn't God directly going in and just smite. Some of it is, fine, I'm not going to protect you anymore. You make your own decision, and you will reap your own benefits or destruction. Same way with a parent saying, fine, you don't want my help, you don't have my help. Still love, it's just not ease. Now, does anybody feel like I've went around the bend? This is a really odd room, isn't it? Because you're not wrong. You have trouble hearing me from right there, and that's not as far away, but at the same time, someone could be right there and whisper, and I could probably hear them from here. This is a weird room. And that's no joke. Me and several other preachers have talked about this room that way. So I apologize, my brother. We'll try to figure out a way where we can fix that. All right. Any thoughts on true biblical love? Now, I think there's one thing we always have to admit, and that's not easy. When there's true biblical love, there's no room for hate. Can there be anger? Sure. Righteous anger is there. Hate, there's no room for that. But what is encouraged in society? And I'm not just talking about American society, I'm talking about human society in general. Hate. Jesus even acknowledged in one of his teaching sessions, you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love everyone. Love those that persecute you. That doesn't make sense. Actually, from a biblical standpoint, it does. But society says it's perfectly all right to hate other people. No, it's not. And I'll say this, and it still hurts. I do not hate those Hamas terrorists, but I do feel perfectly right in saying there should be justice. Does that make sense? What they did was so savage and evil, it's really on the level of animal activity. Hatred would lead me to want anyone associated with Hamas to die, which would include children, which that's wrong, which would include people that didn't have anything to do with it, but they're just associated, they know someone. Love tells me, sure, there needs to be justice, but even though I'm looking for justice, I'm praying for justice, I support justice, those guys need to get saved. They need to get saved. And I've known people that have done horrible things. They were in prison, they got saved, and when they were truly saved, they didn't deny they'd done wrong, and they didn't deny they deserved death. All they said was, I deserve what I've got, and so I need to be the best I can be on influencing others that's going to get out so they may look to God instead of the life of crime I was in. That's true change. It's not trying to weasel out of what you've done wrong in the past. It's acknowledging it and trying to do as best you can. So, yes, I do pray for Hamas. I just don't pray for them to get what they want in their evil. I pray for them to change by finding Jesus Christ. But the whole situation is sad. So can you seek justice and still love? Yes, but it's not easy because it's very hard within human culture to do that. All right, I'll be quiet. We'll do it. We did a short service tonight. Next